Trigger warning, this episode involves the description of torture and the mention of suicide. A married woman became mad, neglected everything, would not own her husband nor any of the family. I ordered her to be blindfolded. She was lifted up by force, placed in and fixed to the chair in the bathing tub. All this put her in an inexpressible terror, especially when the water was let down. I kept her under the fall 30 minutes, stopping the pipe now and then and inquiring whether she would take to her husband, but she still obstinately denied, till at last, being much fatigued with the pressure of the water, she promised she would do what I desired, on which I desisted, let her go to bed. A week after, I gave her another trial, but added a smaller pipe so that when one let the water fall on top of her head, the other squirted it in her face, or any other part of her head, neck, or breast I thought proper. Being still very strong, I gave her 60 minutes this time, when she still kept so obstinate that she would not promise to take her husband, until her spirits being almost dissipated, she promised to love him as before. I gave her the third trial of the fall and continued her 90 minutes under it. I threatened her with the fourth trial, took her out of bed, had her stripped, blindfolded, and ready to be put in the chair, when, she being terrified with what she was to undergo, she kneeled submissively that I would spare her and she would become the loving, obedient, and dutiful wife for ever thereafter. I granted her request, provided she would go to bed that night with her husband, which she did with great cheerfulness. It appeared that in 90 minutes there was 15 ton of water let fall upon her. Greetings, fellow showerers and showerees. I'm Dr. Steph, and I did my PhD on a history of showers. In my thesis, I reveal how showers, an everyday object that people use to clean and preen their bodies, are part of big picture systems that govern our lives. Showers are a familiar part of the bathroom landscape. However, most people don't know that manufactured showers first emerged from within the walls of early 1800s asylums, with a purpose quite different to that of washing. For 150 years prior to using showers to get clean, physicians contrived devices that poured cold water on the heads of maniacal men and women to cool hot brains and break impetuous wills. In my research, I used the ideas of French philosopher Michel Foucault to explore the historical arrangements that made the shower a thinkable thing, and then eventually an actor in a daily activity we carry out as part of our private lives. In this episode, we will explore a period of radical change in the design and application of the shower that were the product of changing ideas regarding insanity and the treatment of the insane during the 1800s. We will learn about shower inventions such as Dr. Morrison's 1828 cold water douche that he invented to cool the brains of maniacs, and Dr. Mary Delaboste's 1888 ablution system, which used warm water in a prison cell type arrangement to wash the skins of prison populations. The use of water to treat mental illness can be traced back to antiquity. Accounts suggest that modern medical science discovered the use of water to cure insanity quite by accident in the mid-1600s. Here, Mania describes Van Helmont's 1700s discovery of the effect of cold water on a madman. This invention, supposedly dating from the middle of the 17th century, was the fortunate result of chance. A heavily chained madman was being transported on an open wagon. He managed, however, to free himself from his chains and jumped into a lake. tried to swim, fainted. When he was rescued, everyone thought he was dead, but he quickly recovered his spirits, which were abruptly restored to their natural order, and he lived a long time without experiencing any further attack of madness. This anecdote supposedly enlightened Van Helmont, who began to plunge the insane indiscriminately into the sea or into fresh water. The only care that must be taken is to plunge the sufferers into the water suddenly and unawares, and to keep them there for a long time. One need have no fear for their lives. After more than a century of plunging patients into water, Van Helmont's methods came to be considered extremely reprehensible to a well-informed physician of the present day. But it was neither the water treatment nor the lack of regard for bringing someone close to death that the physician of the early 1800s considered reprehensible. By the early 1800s, it was Van Helmont's lack of discrimination about who and what should be treated with water that was considered primitive. The well-informed physician of the 1800s had started to study signs and symptoms, classifying and categorizing species of disease. As Foucault would say, they aimed to establish their authority over conditions such as insanity by entering disease into grids of specification. These physicians used a science of minute and accurate observation to document the nature and expression of diseases that they connected to insanity. Their specialty was pinpointing the location of disease within the body and documenting the effects of prescribed treatments. Various apparatus emerged during this time that harnessed therapeutic forces on particular parts of the body that physicians had specified as the site of disorder. The shower was one such apparatus. Foucault, in The Birth of the Clinic, explains how the medical gaze of the 1800s established a world in which disease was attached to a particular part of the body. The physician could bracket off the person to see and know the species of disease that he was confronted with. Disease communicated through qualities such as heat, and the physician could read these qualities as they acted on the body. As such, the dissected brains of maniacs, combined with observation of the effect of cold on inflammation, signaled the nature of mania and informed the physician of the actions needed to combat it. The qualities that were thought to define mania in the 1700s were a violent heat that boiled the blood and dried out the brain. Thus, cooling the brain seemed an obvious solution. Dr. Blair was an early proponent. Dr. Blair, who, in a letter to Dr. Barnard, declares that he cured a man raving mad, who, being bound in a cart, stripped of his clothes and blindfolded, that the surprise might be the greater, he on a sudden had a great fall of water let down on him from the height of 20 foot, under which he continued so long as his strength would permit. And after his return home, he fell into a sleep, and slept 29 hours, and awaked in as quiet a state of mind as ever, as so had continued to the time of writing that letter, which was 12 months. A hot brain being the cause, perhaps, of several disorders in the understanding, and is in great part found to be true in the ridiculous behaviour of some drunken men, which, when their heads are become cool, abhor what they before did do or say. Such observations reflected an agreement among physicians that an abnormally hot brain was the cause of a mad mind, and that the brain was susceptible to the beneficial effects of shock and prolonged pouring of cold water on the head. Towards the end of the 18th century, Physicians pinpointed the blood vessels in the brain of the insane as the specific site of disorder. Physicians such as Rowley in 1793 had started dissecting the brains of madmen and found the veins of the dura and pia mater, cerebrum and cerebellum are greatly distended with dark-coloured blood. Rowley proposed that passions or meditations forced blood to the brain that, after a prolonged period, caused weakening of the vein walls. Rowley stated, "Madness is commonly caused by a gradual, slow, and continued determination of the blood to the brain from the pathomater animi, or meditation on one subject, until the fluids of the brain become and continue vitiated." The increase in blood was theorized to create heat and irritation and leave contaminants in the brain, resulting in inflammation. The hot brain came to be described as inflamed, and congestion within its blood vessels or nerves viewed as either caused by or causing the chaotic mind. The science of hydropathy observed that cold water could counteract inflammation of the organs and tissue and prevent congestion of the blood. Therapeutic practices to reduce inflammation and congestion included bleedings, blisterings, purges, and application of cold through baths and showers. Physicians hypothesized that cold water's natural qualities of constricting blood vessels would redirect blood away from the brain and towards the internal organs to reduce the brain's unseen inflammation and congestion. With the location of madness now marked out as being within the vessels of the brain, the practice of plunging the whole body into water came to be seen as primitive and uninformed. Knowledgeable physicians now sought to design treatments that could target the brain as the particular site of disorder by pouring water onto the head. Here we have Morrison's 1828 fall of water, which he called a douche. Morrison's design was a replica of a shower created for Italian asylums by Gualandi in 1823. Morrison's particular design had the advantage of being relatively portable, so it could be employed outside of the asylum walls. Given Morrison's interest in providing services to the wealthy in domestic settings, his shower may have been the earliest to enter into private dwellings. Morrison describes his design. The different parts of an apparatus for giving the douche, consisting of a bucket from which a stream of water is made to fall on the head of the patient from different heights, regulated by a rope and pulley, by the cock inserted into the lower part of the bucket. The size of the stream is regulated. In this plate is likewise exhibited a perpendicular section of a warm bath with the position of the patient in it, the form of spring straps to fasten him if necessary, the cover of the bath with space for the patient's neck, and a wax cloth tippet to carry off the cold water. In Morrison's douche, the patient's body and head are arranged according to the physician's prescription. The body is stripped, tied down, sealed and immersed in water. The head, separated off by a collar, endures the fall of water. The physician uses the device to harness the natural forces of water, cold, and gravity to reach into and reorder the brain of the patient. The apparatus and body are thus employed by the physician to carry out his prescription with measured precision. Alongside the effect of inflammation on the brain, the cold shower was argued to exert therapeutic benefit on the more ethereal aspects of insanity. In the 1700s and early 1800s, there was a close connection between the passions, the will, one's spirit, and madness. Physicians believed that excitement or anger could take control of the mad mind, taking hold of attention and imagination. Foucault, in Madness and Civilization, explains that it was thought that the distraction of the mind is the result of our blind surrender to our desires, our incapacity to control or moderate our passions. Physicians believe that passion assumes a kind of additional power which ultimately renders it irresistible even to the most concerted efforts of the will. An unbridled will can fail to moderate the passions. Passion then takes control of the mind and, once having taken hold, overpowers any taming influence of the will. Cold water showers designed to shock were thought to exert an influence on the will. Passion was thought to subdue passion. Cullen, in 1784, wrote, "Fear, being a passion that diminishes excitement, may therefore be opposed to the excess of it. In most cases, it has appeared to me necessary to employ a very constant impression of fear." Fear was a tool employed by one of the founding fathers of psychiatry. Philippe Pinel was a physician who helped to develop modern psychiatry and is remembered for releasing the mad from chains. The moral treatment he proposed in 1794 involved breaking the will of his patients. He stated that one of the major principles of the psychologic management of the insane is to break their will in a skillfully timed manner without causing wounds or imposing hard labour. Pinel believed that fear, like cold, would transmit a beneficial effect on the disordered brain. Fear was aroused in the patient by the shower in two ways. Firstly, the shower started unexpectedly, and secondly, the shower would continue for as long as the patient could endure, creating in them the fear of death. At this time, the animal heat and passion of the mad was thought to signal superhuman power and strength. It was believed that the mad could go without the basic needs of man, such as food and warmth, and they were considered in good health. Due to the supposed superhuman strength, the cold water shock shower was prescribed for an extraordinary length of time and made to fall from height with force. This additional force was considered necessary to break down the unusually strong will of the insane. It was thought that once passions were subdued, the will of the patient could be broken. The will could then be influenced by the physician, allowing a cure to be realized. And the story from the start of this episode of Dr. Blair's fall of water, force was used to produce fear, weakening the will of the patient, making her more liable to submit to the will of the physician and subsequently to the will of her estranged husband. The removal of clothing, binding to the chair and blindfolding, along with the fall of water, are all carried out with the intent of instilling terror, fatigue, and dissipated spirits. Blair employed a discourse that was accepted at that time based on truths regarding madness, the brain, passions, and the will, to threaten further falls of water for increasing lengths of time until the patient's will was broken and she returned to being the normalized subject, the submissive, obedient, and dutiful wife he and society at that time would have her be. Blair's experiments with the application of water target the body to discipline the subject. His prescription of water acts upon the body. These effects then transmit to the mind of the patient, forcing the person to be transformed into a different subject, one that is more agreeable to others. Blair's shower aimed to tame the patient and ensure that she returned to her duty to maintain the social order. A century after Dr. Blair's patient agreed to be an obedient wife, physicians continued to employ the force and duration of the cold water shock shower to treat their patients. For example, in 1835, Dr. Benjamin Rush, in his Diseases of the Mind, advised complete government over mania patients. Dr. Rush found that the douche of cold water has likewise been directed upon the head, as well to diminish vascular action as to repress violence, to overcome obstinacy, and to rouse the patient when indolence or stupor prevails. As such, strapping the patient to a chair, the tranquilizer chair, applying the shower bath for 15 to 20 minutes, and finally threatening the patient with death were considered effective strategies for resistant cases. While Blair had relied on an existing supply of water, later advocates of the shower, such as Rush, were designing buildings to suit their purposes. In the early 1800s, throughout Europe and North America, physicians were writing on the use of architecture in the treatment of the insane. They sought to build therapeutic practices into the walls, windows, vents, gardens, bathrooms, and treatment rooms of the asylum. This idea that architecture can discipline to produce particular subjects is central to my thesis. As Foucault noted in his book, Discipline and Punish, authorities had discovered that stones can make people docile and knowable, in its very materiality, a therapeutic operator. Under the direction of Dr. Rush, the Pennsylvania Insane Hospital Wing included a novel and seemingly one-off design for administering shower baths. In a wing of the hospital, particularly appropriated to the reception of insane patients, a space about 3 feet square was left in the flooring of the galleries, communicating with the cells on each story. This space was occupied by a strong wooden lattice or grating, divided into spaces of about 1 inch square. As these lattices were placed in an exactly perpendicular direction, one over the other, it was easy for the medical attendant to subject the patient to any degree of impression required by directing the water to be thrown from a height of 1, 2, or 3 stories. The physician could increase the force of water, or degree of impression, on the patient by prescribing greater heights of water to be thrown from, and simultaneously decreasing it by disrupting the flow with the lattice. The building was employed by the physician to improve the specificity with which treatment could be prescribed and administered. While Rush's building aided physicians in their control over the fall of water, it's unclear how the supply of water to achieve the important aspect of duration was addressed. This issue was resolved in Ghislaine's 1826 design, which enlisted the roof of the building into the prescription of the cold shock shower. Here the roof of the building gathers and stores the water, and the height that the water falls is set in stone. In Ghislaine's shower, wood, leather, copper and bricks partake in the prescription of the shower. In 1826, patients remained bound to a chair, and the attendant was positioned out of sight so that the patient would be surprised by the shower's start and end. Various objects allowed the physician to prescribe the amount of force and duration of the treatment. The barrel provided the option of submersion in water, which could be warm or cold. The effusion shower bath, which is on the left, could be used if a more violent application was sought. Water poured in and drained away through the construction of the building, solidifying the place of the cold water shock shower in the manufactured treatment of the insane. The fall of water, douche, and shower bath of the 1700s and early 1800s was born at a time when medical science had connected insanity, the will, and the spirits to the body. It was conceivable that a mechanical device, could harness natural forces to counteract the effects of disease and to diminish the patient's will and spirit. The promise of returning the insane to being healthy, productive members of society justified building fearful devices into the walls that housed them, or bringing such devices into their homes. The problem of willful disobedience was of concern not only to physicians. Alongside the significant shifts in management of the insane, the mid-1800s were a time of major penal reform. Although attempts were made to separate the insane from criminals through the construction of asylums and large state prisons, the distinction between insanity and criminality remained blurred. As Foucault in Discipline and Punish pointed out, from 1832, every crime and even every offence now carries with it, as a legitimate suspicion, but also as a right that may be claimed, the hypothesis of insanity, in any case of anomaly, and the sentence bears with it an assessment of normality and a technical prescription for a possible normalization. Therapeutic devices such as the cold shower were used in prisons to treat both the obstreperous lunatic and those not insane. Foucault writes that in the early 1800s, penologists were taking an interest in the corrective methods of medicine. Across Europe, punitive practices had become more reticent. One no longer touched the body, or at least as little as possible, and then only to reach something other than the body itself. The growth of industrialization and the use of bodies for mass production was connected to a disruption in the relationship between punishment and inflicting wounds. Technologies such as the shower provided both physicians and prison administrators with a way to inflict unpleasantness on the body without leaving the marks of the whip. However, as corporal punishments were falling out of favour, alternatives were sought to affect the minds, ideas, and conscience of the criminal. The importance of controlling the ideas of maniacs and criminals would see much of Europe and the US embrace solitude as a means of correction. The theory was that being excluded from all human society will operate potently on the minds and manners of the people of every class. It will have its force in stopping their career and drawing them back from the paths of perdition. The introduction of the cell within asylums and prisons was key to enacting this isolation. The importance of separating prisoners into cells would influence the shower unit design for hygiene that many people are familiar with today. While mania had been connected to observations of the brain and its vessels, the obstinate will was not so easily connected to a particular part of the body. Physicians had argued that the soul, will, and nerves were somehow connected. However, Rowley in 1793 wrote that the human knowledge has not yet discovered, nor perhaps never may discover, what the soul is, how it operates on the body by means of the nerves, or how the nerves operate on the soul and convey our will or sensations. This lack of connection between the mind and the body brought practices that targeted the body to influence the will into question. Although the cold water shock shower was acceptable within the original moral treatment, a new form of moral treatment emerged in the mid-1800s that no longer accepted bodies being subjugated to induce fear. Aligning crime and punishment with abnormality and treatment meant that practices that used violent physical force had, in the early 1800s, been able to be carried out with apparently benign intent. Parnell had advocated for the use of fear, but this did not mean that the physician should be seen as a tyrant. Parnell suggested that to render the effects of fear solid and durable, its influence ought to be associated with that of a profound regard. Coercion must always appear to be the result of necessity, reluctantly resorted to. With the shower employed as a kind of intermediary, the physician could act with a measure of kindness, while the cold water inflicted calculated brutality. We profit from the circumstance of the bath, or shower bath, remind him of the transgression or of the omission of an important duty, and, with the aid of a faucet, suddenly release a shower of cold water upon his head, which often disconcerts that madman or drives out a predominant idea by a strong and unexpected impression. If the idea persists, the shower is repeated, but care is taken to avoid the hard tone and the shocking terms that would cause rebellion. On the contrary, the madman is made to understand that it is for his sake and reluctantly that we resort to such violent measures. Sometimes we add a joke, taking care not to go too far with it. Under the control of the physician, it was argued that the power of the shower could be regulated, and the physician himself could moderate the suffering. However, the cold shock shower was not actually benign. Some physicians argued that the potentially harmful effects of the shower were part of the benefit. However, eventually, shower-related deaths saw those that employed the cold water shock shower charged with being outdated and ignorant. By the time the 1858 Medical Act gave the Medical Council of the UK support to control the education of physicians and to prosecute those deemed ignorant, the legitimacy of hydropathy was being questioned. In defence of the practice, statements by gentlemen lecturers, the most eminent among the present heads of the profession of medicine, and works of stupendous labour and research were used by Johnson in 1854 to argue that hydropathy undoubtedly includes powerful therapeutic agents. Although Johnson was advocating for hydropathy, he declared that indiscriminate douchings for almost unlimited periods of time may be tolerable perhaps to the phlegmatic German, but a country like England, it is not likely to furnish very numerous constitutions which would bear, either with advantage or safety, the daily hammering of so powerful an engine as the douche. Newspaper articles published around this time reported deaths of the inmates of an asylum and prison. The shower was deemed frightening and a fearful example of the mismanagement of publicly funded institutions. The death of a prisoner during a shower bath punishment was used here in Harper's Weekly to illustrate the horror, and the shower subsequently fell out of favour. Just as plunging had been connected to the uninformed physician, showers were to become a feature of the unintelligent. The Prison Association of New York in 1845 wrote, "The efficiency of punishment depends exactly upon its tendency to increase or diminish the self-respect of its victim. Hence the growing abhorrence among intelligent philanthropists for the use of the cat, the shower bath, the ball and chain. Practices that would wear down or diminish the spirit of the prisoner or patient were looked upon in disdain." Brown in 1864 wrote, "Cruelty, drownings were resorted to quench the spirit, to frighten men into their senses, to subdue and train, to overcome and tame the passions. We shall say little more of what is worthy of being called the immoral treatment. By the mid-1800s, the inducement of fear had turned from being a therapeutic tool to a destructive aspect of the cold water shock shower. The shower bath, as a means of repression or punishment, would probably be destructive by the feelings of fear or dislike which it would inspire, of all the benefits likely to be derived from their use as therapeutic agents. The cold water shock shower went from being a saviour of the state to a foe. It was abandoned in Britain, Europe, and parts of the Americas by all but a few asylums. In prisons, the shower bath was deemed a relic of barbarism, a connecting link between the outrages of the Inquisition and the inhumanities of the slave pen, a process of gradual strangulation by drowning, whose existence is a blot upon the fair escutcheon of our state. In 1872, at the International Penitentiary Congress, the shower bath was reported to be forbidden, amongst other modes of torture, in most prisons, but still practiced in some. Despite these criticisms, showers not only endured, but their use spread, and they became an essential part of daily living. For the 150 years that the fall of water was used to treat and punish, the use of cold water distinguished them from something that could be used to wash a person's body. Although the possibility of using a shower to wash someone was apparent to those who used them, there was no reason to when warm baths were available. A prison cell keeper reported in 1835 that we use both ducking and shower bath, directed for special purposes by the doctor. The water falls through a sieve in a large streak, comes very heavy, and we are directed to give it so many minutes, sometimes 2 and sometimes as much as 15 or 16 minutes, according to the doctor's directions. Once I gave it a half hour and thought the man was better by it. The quantity is increased as repeated. I never knew it to harm to anybody. We did it as medical treatment principally. It will calm the most obstreperous lunatic. I am careful in administrating the cold shower bath to follow the directions of the physician. Of my own mere suggestion, I have done it to others not insane, to the assistants with their own consent, not in winter but in summer. I have never done it merely to wash a patient. We have warm baths to wash them in, which we apply daily. While the 1872 International Penitentiary Congress signalled the end of showers as a form of punishment, an interest in punish hygiene expressed at the same event transformed showers from devices that touched the brains, will, and ideas of lunatics and prisoners into devices that acted upon their skin. In society at large, the benefits of bathing were being debated during the 1800s, and regular bathing was generally avoided. At the same time, enforced cleanliness was argued to be a necessary part of the system of governing patients and prisoners. Both the insane and the criminal were thought to have particular need for washing. For insane patients, frequent washing was necessary so that the peculiar odour of the insane, so often described, does not permeate every ward. In prisons at that time, for the large majority of individuals, hygiene was said to be an almost unknown virtue, or in any case, a disagreeable practice. However, just as cold water could reach in to modify the inflamed brain and wear down the spirit, warm water and the resulting cleanliness could also permeate into the body to exert an influence. Worthington in 1851 wrote that warm baths could soothe, refresh, and allay excitement. Washing the body was connected to mental and moral faculties and was employed to improve health and self-respect. The Prison Association of New York in 1845 stated, "The moral influence of a habit of personal cleanliness is neither slight nor unimportant. It is important, moreover, that the means of bathing should be available in winter as well as in summer. It is admitted that the bath is not so absolutely necessary in cold as in hot weather, yet it is at all times refreshing, invigorating, healthful. Many of the employments in prisons are of such a nature that the frequent use of the bath is demanded as well to ensure self-respect as to promote health, for who so degraded as not to feel a deeper degradation from personal uncleanliness?" It was, however, a shift in focus to skin as the locus of disease that saw it become the primary target of washing. The mid-1800s issued in the modern period of dermatology and saw connections established between the skin and a multitude of diseases. Mania could be identified in the skin. In those cases of maniacal excitement, functions of the skin are greatly perverted, the surface of the body and the extremities being in most cases cool and either moist or excessively dry and harsh, and presenting to the eye an earthy or dusky appearance. Physicians argued that the skin benefited from the application of water to remove impurities. One theory was that the pores of the skin functioned as tubes that aided in respiration and purification of the blood. The idea was that water frees the mouths of the breathing pores from all obstruction. The skin also does possess and exercise the power of extruding from the system through its pores poisonous matters which have found their way into the blood, which can then be scrubbed off with soap and water. The 1853 Hydropathic Encyclopedia, for example, recommended regular cool or cold showers as a way of addressing deficient external circulation, capillary obstruction, and internal congestion or engorgement. Skin washing became an important part of managing personal health. Within the asylum, personal cleanliness is also afforded by each patient having a warm bath once a week. Where these regulations prevail, the skin of insane patients loses its most repulsive and unwholesome aspect. General health is promoted, and with health, comfort and cheerfulness. While washing was argued to benefit the health and well-being of the insane and prisoners, the institution's interest in health and well-being was in its connection to labour. Healthy skin would enable inmates to work, while work was argued to further also improve the health of their skin. Worthington in 1851 suggested that perspiration from labour seems the grand means appointed by nature to ensure the healthy action of the skin. The inability of the insane to work was thought to account for the altered condition of the cutaneous surface, and thus the large number of the incurable insane that suffered fatal chronic disease. Hygiene, health, and work were thus connected. While good health was used to advocate for washing, the link between productivity and health had the added benefit of contributing to the economy of the institution. The good health of the inmates or prisoners allowed them to work, thus diminishing the cost of their incarceration. Prisoners were compelled to be clean, healthy, and productive, and a want of cleanliness was considered a punishable offence within a number of prisons. Despite the link to productivity giving reason for regular bathing, at this time bathing was often not attended to in asylums, and many prisoners bathed infrequently, as little as 4 times a year. Dr. Mary Delabost, a French prison physician, is credited with conceiving of the idea of showers for washing in prisons. Following the 1872 International Penitentiary Congress, the French government asked prison doctors what could be done to improve the cleanliness and hygiene of prisoners. Delabost had been attempting, without success, to have cold showers installed for the purpose of hydropathy at the Rouen prison. He proposed that converting these showers through the use of warm water would be an efficient and effective way to promote hygiene. He claimed that the shower would engage the prisoners to scrub with the assistance of soap, thus detaching impurities that the water running over the surface of the body would then take away. He employed a cellular design, which prisons had been using for some time to separate prisoners and improve the ease and efficiency of surveillance. In Delabost's ablution system, the skins of the prison population were washed away to ensure health and productivity. The shower functioned to wash away impurities with the greatest economy of time, water, heating, and surveillance. Delabost's efforts to improve the health of the prison population through hygiene measures drew on broader societal discourses regarding public health and productivity. Towards the middle of the century, strategies to encourage personal hygiene habits were employed as part of greater health reforms. The hygiene shower was a shower for the masses, and less than a decade after Delabost's invention, Dr. Lasser promoted a shower block called the People's Baths as an economical way of supplying public bathing to the poorer classes. By the end of the 19th century, hygiene showers had proliferated and become a common feature of public baths across Europe. They were also found in army barracks, in schools, factories, and on ships, in athletics clubs and schools. Showers were also available in the British colonies, which is discussed further in episode 2. The hygiene shower, as an object of economy rather than hydropathy, became the domain of the engineer rather than the physician, with showers installed in asylums according to engineering plans and specifications. Indeed, Gerard, in 1895, argued that baths were now the enemy of the asylum. They should be abandoned as they were costly to maintain, time-consuming to use, dirty, harmful, wasteful of water, and dangerous in terms of spreading disease, scalding, and being used for suicide. At this time, showers of various designs appeared for washing the insane, including the needle bath, hand sprays, and rain baths. The rain bath, in which the shower head with a fine economical spray was angled on the incline, as is familiar to us today, was said to be the desirable option, as it could avoid, as Gerard noted in 1894, the shower striking the head of the bather, which to many persons is quite disagreeable. The shower, once designed to be unpleasant and target the head, could be used without the head getting wet at all, so as to avoid any unpleasantness. Furthermore, the rain bath would eliminate the need for an attendant to assist with showering and would avoid the undesirable impression that patients might be showered against their will. Such showers were vastly transformed from the fall of cold water that Dr. Blair had employed to cure a wayward wife. The sudden shock, the fear, and the unpleasantness, and the cooling effects on the maniacal brain were all exchanged for the agreeable, efficient application of warm water and soap for the purpose of clean skin and health. In today's episode, we have seen how shifts in knowledge through the 1800s made the shower thinkable, firstly as a device to aid in the treatment of the insane and later to wash the skins of the masses. The well-informed physician's understanding of the brains, minds, and will of the insane led to the manufacture of an object that would induce therapeutic cold, shock, and fear. The ideas that governed the practices of the physician and the lives of their patients materialized in various shower designs, and in their materiality, these ideas were made durable and could proliferate. However, when the shock water shower fell out of favor, the shower was reborn. Connections were formed between the skin, health, and productivity, and the failed hydropathic shower was transformed into an effective and efficient machine for bringing hygiene to the masses. The dosage of 1.5 hours was reduced to 5 minutes. 15 tons of water reduced to 25 litres. The shower now served the good of the nation by washing away the impurities of the masses with the minimum of expense. The shower went from being a device intended to inflict unpleasantness to one that was very agreeable. So agreeable, in fact, that the following century would see populations calling for showers to be provided for them, and the mass production of shower units that people could purchase for their own homes.